So welcome everyone to January 2024. Hard to believe, but we are in another year. So wonderful opportunity, January, of course, to think about the year ahead. I'm not a big believer in New Year's resolutions, but I think it certainly is a wonderful time for reflection. So hopefully we'll be able to do some of that in the call today, and really curious to hear from you about what you're facing as we go into January 2024 and beyond. I've had some dialogue with some of you prior to the call, so anxious to what you have to share with us. The chat is open. I try to glance at the chat and see what's going on there. So if you've got some comments or are a little bit shy, please don't hesitate to at least scribble that into the chat. But I will encourage you to keep your cameras on if you are interested in participating and creating more of a live experience for everyone. And to jump in, unmute yourself, jump in with a comment, raise your hand. This is a really open forum to talk about careers in general, what you may be experiencing, to learn from others, ask questions. Don't feel shy. It's a vulnerable subject for everyone, no matter what stage of your career you might be in. And while I focus primarily on people in mid-career, that's kind of 50 plus or minus, late 40s, early 50s and beyond, I welcome all generations on the call. I'm a big believer in the multi-generational workforce. And I think that the principles of career development and maintenance in the digital age are kind of broad and comprehensive across everyone's career. So having said that, I wanted to actually invite Brenda Newberry to share, because she and I have been going back and forth with a situation that she's in, which I think is kind of exciting, and also to me represents a lot of the perhaps unconventional, but I think current strangeness, but perhaps opportunity in the career space. So Brenda, would you please jump in and share what's going on?
Okay. I emailed John that I had a verbal offer for a job that I got through word of mouth. There was no job posting. And I told him I needed to wait until I had a letter in writing to say what it was, where it was, because I'm just cautious about that. I'd hate for it to get back to employees or whoever before it's announced. So I am joining a nonprofit called HIcks Farm. I'm going to be an assistant to the executive director. My role will mainly be fundraising and staff development, and I love it. I was very committed that whatever I do, it be really aligned with my mission, my personal mission, which changed about 5 years ago. So even though there are elements of this that I've done before, I tell people everything I've ever done, I've never done before. How do I look for that? And so I'm starting part-time. What she really wants is somebody to take over as executive director. She's the founding person. She doesn't receive any salary, but there are 6 staff people who receive salaries. So blending in a new salary at some point will not be a glaring disproportion. But right now, the funding isn't really there for me to be in that role past 3 months. So I'm happy to step in, do whatever I can to change the trajectory of money coming in. But I decided 5 years ago, I became very aware of how our environment's being degraded. Some people call it climate change. Some people don't want to call it that. I'm okay, but the environment is definitely degrading. And I decided to focus on farm, food, health, and then I added community. I've done a lot of community practicing with some of Peter Block's methods. I don't know if y'all know about that. So I've done some work in the background to just get really clear inside myself what I want my next role to be, what I want it to feel like. I used a couple of books. I've popped in and watched these Zooms. I haven't really participated. But the way the job actually occurred is I offered to drive someone to Columbus, Ohio. I'm in Cincinnati. It's about 2 hours up the road, to carpool to a protest for fracking in Ohio state parks. And I don't normally jump in on those things, but this particular time I felt the need to jump in, offered to carpool. I picked up this woman who's on my way. It worked. She doesn't even drive, but the woman that was connecting me to the person that needed a ride was the executive director of this nonprofit. And as far as she was concerned, we were done. But I reached out to her later saying, hey, I'd like to know more about your farm. I've been on the property before. So we had a conversation. I was volunteering my husband to get involved because he's not as busy as I'd like him to be. And I don't mind him reaching out on his behalf. He's going to be helpful at the farm. And then to that, she said, well, tell me about you. And I just did an open conversation. And at the end of that, she said, do you mean at a director level? And I went, yes. I didn't go, well, what do you mean by that? I didn't go, well, maybe. I said yes, because part of what I had identified for some dissatisfaction was I was not in leadership roles and too much was happening that I didn't have anything to do with. So that was on a Friday. We met on a Tuesday. Within an hour, we were both tearing up saying this just feels like it's spirit-led. And that's one of my priorities. I want there to be spiritual layers to what I do. It doesn't have to be the core mission, but it kind of is. And then we had a follow-up conversation. And so we've gone back and forth figuring out the best way for me to enter because there's some staff issues. But we feel like we've paved the way and I start Tuesday.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, a lot of questions I've got about this and I'm sure others do as well, but let me just kind of lead off here. What strikes me about your experience here, and I love when you share about this question of director, yes or no, and you were very definitive about this. How did you get to that point? Because I think a lot of people in this situation feel pretty vulnerable and feel somewhat unsure about how to state their value, how to stand up for their value. And it sounds to me as if you approach this perhaps even starting 5 years ago, and I'd love to hear about this pivot that you made 5 years ago. You made this intentional choice. You got really clear about perhaps what that value was, where you wanted to apply it. And then you began to, and I talk about this a lot, about kind of, instead of looking to fit into a job or kind of be a supplicant, you have a value and you're looking to take orders, basically. You're looking for people who want what you want. And you're kind of going, okay, so who wants this? Who wants this? You, no, yes, no, great, fine. You're looking for that fit. So can you talk a little bit about this? Because I think so much of the process and the difficulty that people have and being out of work for a long period of time, that's a discouraging process for many people. I think you're presenting an alternative way through. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. I'm sure others would as well.
So I really have done a lot of different things. Early on, it was sales and customer service. Then it became training and development, kind of counseling. I've done some athletic coaching. I've become a Pilates instructor, a snow ski instructor, a certified tennis instructor. So I have this range of interests, and I've gone back and forth between trying to focus on money that didn't really turn into money anyway, and the things I love, which was even less money. So I don't want to present that money's handled. I think this is important. However, we have some leeway. My husband does not have a big career. We've got some money in savings. We don't own our own home. We sold our home. We'd like to buy again. I'm 65. So all that's in the mix. I say I'm not a princess, but I do act like one in some ways. So part of this process has been for me to be more serious about myself and my value and the kind of career path I want. So I was in a part-time job at Cincinnati State Community College as an academic advisor, a part-time job that I accepted because I needed a job and I thought it was part-time and I could find another job while I was in that job. But as we know, especially in the age of LinkedIn, if your most recent job isn't what you want to do, it kind of doesn't line up. So what I resigned from that at the end of June. And so that falls off. And now something that I created as my work, I say I'm a convener and program developer focused on farm, food, health, and community. It's in my LinkedIn. I even named it Emerging Pathways. Have I made a dime with that? No, but it's out there as if that's what I do.
So that's the
And
top
I've
of your
got a business
experience?
card.
Is that the top of your experience
It's at
section?
the top of my experience and it's in my headline. And I've
Right.
got a business card that goes along with it.
Right.
But it's
right.
just a me card.
Right.
It's an identifier. It's my brand. It's the work I want to do. So in March, I was still at that job. I was miserable, but I wrote up a little workshop that I called Creating the World We Want to Live in. Care, connect, create, concretize. We don't need to go into details. I asked my friend Amy, did she want to participate with me? She said yes. So our getting ready to get ready, I'm designing this. And I, in one of our first sessions, said, well, name your suffering. You know, what is it that's got you so unhappy that you want to make a change? And there's value in that. And then we were meeting almost weekly. Then in May, we got a little more committed to meeting weekly. And I felt like we needed a structure. So the book that I happened to run across was Design Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans.
Yep.
And there were multiple tools in there that were useful. One was doing a mind map. So you could see some interest beyond first concentric circle, second, get out about that third concentric circle and you start seeing patterns for what you're actually interested in doing. And they ask you to make up an Odyssey future where you combine things that don't look like they're combined. So that was useful for both of us just to get out of our own boxes. And then as you take these new stories into the world, they call those prototypes or experiments. So we kept meeting regularly and we kind of ran out of juice for that book. And then I said, let's do this other book, Career Stories by Carrie Twigg. Does anybody know that book? It's a beautiful book. And the particular exercise that really moved me, and I pulled this up, was identifying your ideal people on page 78. And I can tell you what I came up with, but I don't want to get bogged down. I've got it marked here. Well, lo and behold, Amy has been applying for jobs, going to interviews, doing the monkey show and not getting jobs. And it's really upsetting her. She goes, this didn't happen to me. Well, she's turned 50 this year. Maybe now this is it. Or it's whatever. It's whatever. You know, employers have lots of choices. So she got a lot more serious about what I really want to do. She identified that part of her suffering was people weren't building into her quite as much. And I said, well, Amy, you're 50. When are you going to be the leader? Why are you looking for other people to mentor you? And she went, oh, so she came up with a phrase, path to leadership. That's what she wants. And that's what she started speaking more of and looking at jobs differently. Well, I borrowed it. Same thing over here, Amy. There's no accident that we're in this conversation together. So I'm going to say, not going it alone. Yes, you can show up on these monthly Zooms, but have your group of trusted advisors. And I have 4. And they're just so useful. Okay, so a couple weeks ago, she got offered a job as an interim associate dean at the same college to work with the dean that she loves the most. There was no job posting. It's a path to leadership. 1 week later, I was offered interim executive director part-time interim executive director. And I did a little tweaking on that and said, the employees have expressed that what they value the most in the executive director is fundraising. Why don't I come in a fundraising role? And I'd already identified I was interested in getting more of that experience in myself. So we worked it out. We massaged it. And I didn't say yes until I had it in writing. And then we had fleshed out what came in today was different than the last thing we discussed. And I like this better. So I've got a 3-month ramp to get to know them. They get to know me, make some progress. There is money in the budget for an income after these 3 months, but I'm going for the executive director level income.
Wow.
So the question was, how was I able to stand up for myself and the type of role I want and the type of income I want?
Well, I think you've done the prep, right?
There was a lot of prep. Okay, so when I went to my meeting with her, we talked on the phone Friday. I go to a meeting on Tuesday. I brainstormed all the documents I could bring with me, and I picked a few. I had applied for a job recently to be a community manager for the Cincinnati Regional Food Policy Council for a nonprofit called Green Umbrella. That's an overarching collaborative organization. It's a beautiful organization. I brought the resume that I put together for that, the cover letter that I put together for that, and the cover letter that I put together for a prior job similar to that. I gave them to her. And I have a poem that I wrote called The Truth of You. I brought that. And I had reason to believe she would be open to that. And so later she said, could you please send me digitally what you handed me that day? I'd like to share it with the board. And I said, yes, I can give you this, and the poem. Do you want the poem? I love the poem. Like just being
you.
Being me. That was exactly it.
Yeah.
Because anything different, and then I'm going to be morphing myself daily, and it's exhausting.
Right. I'm just brimming with enthusiasm over your process and the outcome and your interaction with your friend Amy and her success and turning this from being the job seeker mentality to being the opportunity magnet approach.
So Amy and I are both committed to continuing our process. This is a prototype for both of us.
Yeah.
We both landed interim leadership roles.
Yep.
How bizarre is that?
Not so, actually. I mean, I think you both kind of bring this clear intention to the process, and you have this work that you've done to prep and orient your mindset in an effective direction, and that gets recognized. I love what you're saying to her about, be a leader. And I think a lot of the issues that we have at this stage is that we're not used to thinking of ourselves as leaders, but people are actually looking at us and going, you've been around for a while, you've got answers, right? Don't you have the answers? Why don't you have the answers? Why are you doing this? I think when people talk about, oh, you're overqualified for this role, a lot of what's behind that is this disconnect around, well, haven't you got it all figured out at this point? So even if you're going for a role that you've done before in the past, I think we talked about this question last time, you need to approach this with the wisdom and the experience of being older and having that wisdom and having something to say about that. So I've talked enough. Let's hear from the crowd. What do we think about Brenda's experience? What questions do you have? How does this relate to what's going on with you in your current status? Love to hear more. Don't all jump in.
Can you show the book again, please?
Reinhard, say again.
Can you show the book again, please?
Oh, the book. Yeah. The Career Stories book. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I followed Carrie for years. She's quite a writer. I like her style. And again, no accident, she shifted her focus now to leadership development. So I'm still on board with Carrie.
And I'm gonna do a plug for Designing Your Life. So some of you may know I'm a Designing Your Life coach. I've done the work with Bill and Dave. Great guys. And design thinking is really important. It's a really different approach to looking at your life. It's iterative. As Brenda talks about, this idea of prototyping. I mean, you're in a prototype right now. Both of you and Amy are both in prototypes, right? This is a great opportunity for you to build this thing out the way you want it and see if it works, and can then continue to modify it and iterate on it as it goes. So that's a really important thing.
I did not realize you were a Designing Your Life coach. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I'm in the process actually of trying to incorporate, because they wrote another great book on this called Designing Your Work Life, which is specifically focused on work. And it's interesting. They have been increasingly, because they're in this age cohort as well, they've been increasingly focused on the opportunity issue for older workers, and this idea of using design thinking as a way of evolving your career into this life stage. So yeah, great timing. So who else is going through something similar, or would love to go through something similar to what Brenda's been experiencing?
John, is it worth you going into a little more detail about design thinking? I'm not sure everybody's familiar with it, and the sort of the history of it. And I mean, I know it from a design standpoint, architectural standpoint. It's a great way of looking at the world.
I mean, basically it is, again, it's this idea of taking an iterative approach to all things. Whereas in the old days, we would do a kind of a top-down approach where in software terms, they used to talk about plan your work and work your plan. And then over the last 20 years, people realized, wait a minute, that doesn't really work, because there's too many changes and too many discoveries that you make along the way. That initial plan is not going to pan out. If you follow the plan blindly, you're going to wind up something irrelevant. It's like trying to shoot a rocket at the moon, and you shoot the rocket where the moon is tonight. Actually, you need to shoot the rocket where the moon's going to be in 2 weeks when the rocket gets there. So design thinking, and Bill and Dave are part of the design school at Stanford. And that's a very innovative faculty, and there are a lot of people doing lots of different things there. This has been this program grew out of classes that they were doing where their students were saying to them, these are undergraduates and graduates, they're taking the design courses, but they're also having issues about, well, what do I do when I get out of here? And they found that a lot of their time was being spent in one-on-ones with students who had real life concerns about, what do I do after I graduate? And they kept encouraging them to use the design principles and applying them to their personal lives and their work lives, hence the book, the idea of designing your life. And it's really about being proactive from a design point of view about, well, what do you want, right? Figure out what it is that you want, lay out some of these steps. And I think most importantly, as Brenda's reflecting, is this idea of prototyping, the idea that you can create models for what your life, and in this case, career, can be like. And then you can develop these mini exercises and opportunities to try things out and see if you like them. So how that works in real life is certainly this idea of internship or externship, where you attach yourself to a role or a person or a company and try it out. But you can also research it. You can also get into dialogue with people who do the kinds of roles that you're thinking about. And of course, LinkedIn is a phenomenal network to tap into to find people who are doing this kind of stuff. So ask a lot of questions about what's going on. Take informational interviews, shadow someone, and then do some creative imagination around it. Do some writing about this. Imagine what you would be like in a role. What would your day be like? What would you want your day to be? So you can, as Brenda did, kind of reverse engineer from the vision that you create back into the opportunity that you want or end up getting. And sometimes, as I think both Brenda and Amy discovered, you can create positions that are not published. There are no job descriptions out there, no roles. People are not really focused on their need until you walk into their office and they say, oh my God, you could do this, this, and this. And I have my own direct experience with this as well. Yeah, go ahead.
And people start seeing you differently. When you're willing to accept something like an interim role and start behaving into that role. And now you've got something new on your resume. But it could be just a conversation, like you were saying, or a volunteer opportunity, or especially if you're doing a career change.
One of the things that you did, and I pointed this out, or I asked this question as you were explaining it, about the top of your LinkedIn experience section is your shingle. And it was your shingle before you actually had a role, right? I got into a lot of trouble on LinkedIn about a month or two ago when I wrote a blog post about the little open to work circle on your LinkedIn profile. And I said, don't put the open to work circle there. Don't think that that's going to help you get a job. It denotes passivity. It denotes that you're sitting home waiting for the phone to ring. Please hire me. I'm open to work. It's a very kind of a tentative identity to promote, as opposed to being proactive. And I advocated to put that consulting shingle at the top of your LinkedIn profile. Well, I had a flurry of people saying, that's fraud. Real consultants are real consultants. That's not a real consultancy. I thought, how 2005, right? We live in a gig economy, and it's going to be harder for you to get the job you really want without stating it in some way, shape, or form, and without being willing. And again, Brenda, you're my poster person for this kind of work, of saying, look, let's do an experiment here. Let's see how it works. Let's basically date for a while to see if there's a real committed relationship here that works for both of us. So it's a little bit more risk for the person being hired, because we're used to thinking, oh, thank God I got a job. I got a paycheck coming in. I can breathe easy. Not in this world. That tenure is getting shorter and shorter and shorter across all generations, really, for young people. I mean, Gen Z and young millennials are in jobs for 2 years, maybe. For the average is about 3 to 4 years for the entire workforce. So you've got to really stand up for what it is that you want to do, because there's a taker out there. There's someone who needs that. So have that shingle, that statement of your value, regardless of what your day job is, on your LinkedIn profile, because you're going to have an opportunity to be a consultant, to be a gig worker, to have a side hustle. And you should be developing all that, because it doesn't detract from your value. It adds to your value, and it adds a competitive edge. So lots to think about. Does that help explain? I mean, Bob, I kind of went a little bit beyond your question, but it does really reflect some of the design thinking mindset that you can begin to learn or consider adopting in the work that Bill and Dave have done at Stanford through the Designing Your Life books.
John,
You covered it well, John.
Yes,
Thank you.
Howard.
yeah, to the point you're just making, I saw something on someone's, I saw a post on LinkedIn from someone that I know who remained nameless to her 2,700 followers. That was basically rather than addressing each one of you individually to try doing some networking, I'm in need of a new role and blah, 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 and here's what I've done and who I am, I mean, that was, to me, read desperation.
Mhm.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
There was a person a few months ago, I'm not sure if it was a man or a woman, who shared a post that was very desperate, that was along the lines of, I can't believe it. I've been out of work for a year. I've gone in on X number of interviews, this and this and this. And it was this long litany of frustration. And they were getting tremendous outpouring of sympathy. You know, yeah, I hear you, employers suck, da, 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 you know, hang in there. Yeah, you've gotten a raw deal. And I sent her a note that said, look, I really hear what you're going through and it's rough. However, I want to suggest to you that airing this on LinkedIn could be counterproductive because the people that you want to consider you for a job are going to be reading this. And if you come across as a victim and a complainer, they're going to think twice about hiring you. So what I would suggest you do is absorb every one of these supportive potential colleagues and allies from the comment into your network and then delete the post. So there's no trace of this when people come around to say, well, let me see what's going on with her on LinkedIn. And that didn't go well. People were, coming on top of me going, how can you do this? You know, this is not supportive. And da, 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 da. How can you say this about her? You know, she's a victim. Well, how's that working out for you? What did you think, Howard?
I would have never have done that. Never. I mean, I've been out since, all realistic measures since April when the startup ran out of money. And it's been really tough. There is a thing called ageism. I've been working in human capital management all my life. I know HR in and out pretty much. And, I laugh because, they can't ask you how old you are, but they do ask they do make your year of graduation mandatory field, right? So what do you buy? And then the other thing that I'm really noticing and really getting frustrated with is you go through a lengthy interview process, you dedicate 5 hours to a company, and they ghost you.
Right.
I mean, that to me is just, things have really changed.
Yeah.
Things have really changed.
Tell us about your process and how that's evolving and what's your top question?
My top question, how do you get around ageism? How do you get around the fact that, I said, wait a minute, let me hit the nail right on the head here. So the opening line of the cover letter is, yes, I could certainly retire, but the R word is not it's not my vocabulary. I want to do this and blah, 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 blah. And my frustration level is pretty high.
I hear you.
Yeah.
So, my knee jerk about ageism is you gotta circumvent it. Because if you start to kowtow to it, if you try to accommodate it, like all bias, it's going to destroy you. It's the last ism, as we say in the biz. It is accepted. It is kind of unconsciously accepted by people. Like, well, of course you're old, so of course you need to go away. Of course you're diminished. You really want to retire. You really you're not going to be as sharp. Oh, you're going to get sick more often, and you're going to miss days, and all of this bullshit
What it is.
mythology that's gone on. You would think that more companies would be aware of this. There is an initiative which you may be familiar with called the Age-Friendly Employer Initiative, started by Tim Driver at Retirement Jobs, and they're making some progress. They have a list of, I don't know how many, dozens of companies now who have committed to an age-friendly environment, who are dissolving this ageist approach to hiring. Bottom line for me is that the way you circumvent ageism is through networking, is that you start by doing what Brenda's done, which is to really state that value proposition that you stand by, cite the deliverables of what it is that you do, niche down into your field of endeavor and decide on what those deliverables are that represent what you love doing, what you do well, what your world, your industry needs, and what you can get paid for. It's those 4 ikigai questions.
Yep.
And then build relationships based on that, starting with the people that you know, but also based on people with whom you can share an affinity, where there can be some real alliances, shared interests. And you want to be giving to your network 80%, and you want to be asking for favors 20%. Exercise your thought leadership, whether it's on LinkedIn as a poster of information, sharer of articles, curator of content, out in your community, volunteering, participating in events.
Exactly what, John, that's exactly what I'm doing. I've actually joined a group out of Toronto called Mars Discovery. I don't know if you're familiar with them or not, but I'm a advisor around customer success and customer engagement, customer experience. And I work with founders of startups, Canadian based, they're all Canadian.
Yep.
Who have a couple $1 million in revenue and want to grow their business to 100 million.
Yep.
So that's
Great.
At least keeping my mind active, but it's not paying the bills.
Right. But it's a way to seed the kind of situation that Brenda is sharing from the other side of it, which is the completion, the success side of it. You have an opportunity through that organization, through perhaps others, to do some prototypes, right? Based on what you deliver. Architect a prototype where you can build a case study that you can then use as a calling card and take to a potential consulting client. Could be an employer, but maybe it starts out as a consulting engagement, and see who needs it. Demonstrate the value that you delivered in the prototype, where it's going to go from here, how it's going to develop, how it works for them. Maybe that's a way of productizing what you do and pulling it out of this mindset around employee, older, timeline, benefits, workforce, culture, all of those crazy things that recruiters and HR and hiring managers are wrestling with. you're pulling it completely out of that. It's just about the value that you deliver. It's about moving the needle. You're in, you deliver, you're out. No harm, no fuss. Then they may look back and go, wow, we just loved working with Howard. Maybe we should bring him back. At that point, you can decide whether you really enjoyed it or whether it's not quite ideal enough for you and you want to keep going. You want to try to find something that's even more ideal than that.
Got it.
So you have more parity in the conversation and you're taking it completely out of this debilitating, infuriating, ignorance that you're dealing with.
Thank you.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, a lot of sense. Thank you. I took copious notes.
Howard, I think we have a lot of mutual interests. And I'm Reinhard, I'm the exotic animal here. I'm 71 and probably the oldest here.
Oh, I'm
And,
72.
Hey, guys.
I got you beat.
I got you beat. 74.
Funny.
There we go.
Oh. And but I'm not American. I'm in the north of Munich. And Howard, I just sent you a LinkedIn invitation. So
I love it.
let's see if we can find some mutual points of interest.
Thank you.
My work here today is done. Thank you, guys. That's great.
That's
I
awesome.
love it.
Thank
That's
you.
what this is for. This is a community. So we need to be reaching out and helping each other. I love it. Angelika, you've got your hand raised.
Hi, this is Angelika, and I apologize for not having my video up today, not like me. But I'm in a situation, I left my company back in August. There was some mutual things. One, they were moving back on site. I had been hired mostly remote. It was, 2 hours away. Two, their needs changed. They needed to, cut the budget, that kind of thing. But I also really needed to take some time off. I'm 44 and I just got married. I had just gotten married, the year before, and we were trying to, do the whole fertility IVF thing. And I really needed some time to just do that without the stress of work. And so for the first time in my life, I've been working since I was 16, 17. There's a gap, and I have received so much loving and sincere advice about how to manage and explain it. And now that, some months have passed, we've gotten to what we need, the step that we needed to get in our fertility process. I'm now seriously, more seriously, I should say, looking for a job. And, I just got an answer back, from a great opportunity. And someone said, before I forward your resume, I'd love to know a little bit more about your situation. And so, my ears perked up because now I really have to come up with a really, good answer. And I'm hearing, keep it concise, don't tell the whole story. And so I'd love to, I guess, get even more advice on how to handle that professionally and sincerely, authentically.
Yep.
Coming into, situations where, I'm also, a member of 3 different, school networks that I think are really close in New York. And so people know that I was going through a fertility process, and I don't want to, I don't want to hide things. I'm not a great liar. Don't want to be one. So yeah, any advice is super welcome.
I want to defer to the women on the call, but I do want to say that this situation has gotten better. I think over the last 10 years, there's a tremendous amount of support for women who take a family-related break. And by the way, this includes having kids. It also includes caregiving. There is an ongoing evolution in the workplace, understanding the value of the break, understanding the way in which the reflective time that you've spent on the break actually positively impacts your ability to do better work. So I think there's a personal growth aspect of this that you can weave into your story and share your personal reflections about what you've learned about life and work, and some of the, related to some of the skill sets that you have used, how it's improved those skill sets going forward, and how you intend to take this forward. And with that, I want to get the opinion of some of the women on the call who may themselves have been in this kind of situation, may have a gap that they've dealt with.
Thank you.
Or who have friends, or who have seen it, talked about it. I know, I mean, Stevie, you had a comment.
Hey, John, how's it going? I was on the I think last month's call too as well.
Yeah.
But it's my second time joining. It's really great to be here with all the rest. I apologize too. I've got you in my pocket. I'm walking my dog right now,
Yeah.
so I can't hold this and get
Sure.
on camera. But just a comment, comment and a question.
Did you? I don't want to. Is this about Angelika's question?
More so with Howard's question about ageism.
Okay.
Sorry, should I
Let's
save
hold,
that?
I want to come back to you, but I don't want to drop the Angelika question because it's such an important question.
Okay, go ahead. Yep.
And really, I want to acknowledge that and get some more actionable feedback for her, particularly from some of the other women on the call. So please,
Yeah, I'll save it for later.
If you guys would jump in, Kelley or Sandy or Michelle or Maria, Deborah, Katie,
Brenda.
yes. Katie and Brenda, but let's start with Katie because we haven't heard from you yet today.
Have you heard, Angelika, or of this? It's a website. It's a great company. It's called iRelaunch, and it's for women. It's for men now too, and it's. I found out about it through another group, and mostly it's people who have gaps. So and for all sorts of reasons, taking care of their kids, what you just talked about, just taking, I myself have quite a bit of a gap because I just decided to stop looking for a while, but you should check it out. It's called lowercase I, then relaunch. And if you put your email in the chat, I can send you some information on it if you'd like. But it's a great organization, actually, for anybody on the call.
Yeah. It really is the OG organization for this. She started this, I think, maybe 20 years ago. So there's a lot of background.
And there are big companies, and the person who started it, she's just a lovely woman. When I found out about it, she was kind enough to give me a free. I went to one of their this was before COVID, in-person meetings, and it was at Stanford, and it was just wonderful. And anyway, it's a great organization. So
thank you so much.
Brenda.
So I definitely have gaps in my resume. I loved what John said about a family-related break, and it gave me my reflective time that will impact my ability to do better work. And I just feel like with a lot of questions that interviewers ask, they're not necessarily looking for the full story. They're just looking for how you answer the question. And if inside you, it comes across as brief, matter of fact, kind of what's next, then it's a non-issue. But if you start trying to explain it and adding some words, that I don't think there's anything wrong with a break for that particular reason. And you could, on the other hand, go, well, I want to say my reason, and they'll either be okay with it or they won't. And that's important to me in an organization. So that's part of the be all you. So it's really a choice. And I would recommend to practice it with a safe person, just so you can say it calmly in whichever way you decide to share it. Does that help at all, Angelika?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Angelika. Yeah, that helps tremendously. Yeah, I should mention it's a 6-month. I mean, because we're in the fertility process, and I don't actually. I mean, I don't have a pregnancy. I don't have children. So it's like a 6-month. So far, I mean, I don't have a job yet, so it could be longer. But yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate it.
And I also think in this day and time, a 6-month gap is not a lot of time. It might feel like it for you, or somebody might have said something that makes you feel that. But it can take a while to find a new good fit job.
Thank you so much.
There's some interesting writing on this concept of the 60-year career. Strangely enough, at the Wall Street Journal of all places. And there is a kind of a growing body of career thinking around how careers are changing, and that it is no longer this idea of get a good education, you work for 40 years, then you retire. That's no longer the case. It is now a lifelong proposition for all sorts of reasons, economics being one of them, but different view of life being another. And over the course of a 60-year career, you're not going to be working in the same job. You're not going to be necessarily working in a job for all 60 of those years. You're going to be taking gaps because life changes inside you as well as around you. And that's an enriching process where you are accruing value, which translates into commercial value for people you're working for and with. So I would also encourage you to seek out thinkers, employers, look at who's posting on LinkedIn. Find the progressive companies, the progressive leaders, and follow them, engage with them. There are many, many other women in leadership positions who have come back from gaps, who are better for it, who have their own dialogue around it. And riffing on what Brenda was saying, be enthusiastic about your process. Be excited when you get the question. Like you were waiting for them to ask this question so you can just tell them how excited you are about what you've learned and how you've grown as an individual through this process. And in a world where we're talking more about the impact of workplace culture on productivity, having a positive, enthusiastic coworker means a lot more than it used to. So just thinking about that for a sec. And then Kelley.
Yeah, I first of all, I love what's been shared, but I was going to give a story from a slightly different perspective about a man that was going through a break that I was looking to hire, who had a break on his resume. But before I get to that, just Angelika, I feel for you because I was also there for a long while. And so I wish I had Brenda to whisper in my ear back then. And I appreciate what you're going through. But from a man's perspective, there was a gentleman who was working for me and worked for me for 3 years. But prior to his coming to us, when I got his resume, he had a break, and it looked as he had been at a company for a very short period of time. And as I passed that around with other interviewers, what do you think? I was cautioned to, red flag, drop him. And there was just something about it that I went back and asked him, can you just explicitly tell me why you were there for such a short period of time and why it was that it took you a bit to find what you came back? And what had happened was it was a bait and switch of location for him, and he was going to have to move his family. His kid was a great baseball player and was going to have to take his kid out. And I had found then on LinkedIn, after he shared that with me, that he had written about his son in LinkedIn about, being what it means to a boy that his father kind of sticks up for him. And I thought, I'm going to hire this guy. Then it was incumbent on me to make the path with my peers who wanted me to let him go. And I found out one was in a networking group during that same period of time with him. And it was a little competition, I think, actually. It was a very strange scenario that this gentleman got hired earlier than the gentleman I hired. And so he was a naysayer, partially because of some competition, which I thought was pretty unseemly. So I say that to say that there is still I think in Marla's point there, that just be cautious about the way in which you talk about skills that you gather through that process, resilience that you gather through that process, that if you can talk about the positives that are learned that you can pass on to the organization, even through difficult times, the reason for it's less important, as long as you can be very forthright, like Brenda said, and even practice with somebody else, so it doesn't sound convoluted, it's just straightforward.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kelley.
We only have a few more minutes, but I did want to go back to Stevie and just give you the final word here before we go out, and just share a little bit about what's going on with you. If you're still
yeah, I'm still here. Sorry. Kind of building off the theme of everything here. I think it's I think it's kind of presumptuous to think that from the hiring standpoint, that we all have careers that unfold the way we intended to be or we envision. I mean, there's going to be bumps on the road that are beyond our control, whether it be a tough job market, layoff, termination, or financial constraints. And sometimes you just have to grab a lifeboat in the interim, and these can be kind of like short-term jobs, right?
Yeah.
Like contract jobs, and that's kind of where I find myself now. I have two. I'm working for two startup companies now. One is a startup that I kind of co-founded with my colleagues, classmate at UCLA Anderson, which is where I was introduced to you, John. You had some great sessions over there with the career program, and then it's been going well. But I'm not getting. It's just sweat equity. So we've been building a software platform, SaaS platform in the PMO, project management space, for the past 6 months, and it's been great. But it just doesn't keep the lights on. And then I've been trying since last. Probably in June of 2023 to kind of get a full-time role. And the only thing I got was a contract role for a company, a space electronic, like radiation hardened electronics company that is used in space satellites. So it's very interesting. It's very promising and great, but it's just it's an early stage startup that has just finished off $7 million seed A funding, but it's going to be like two-year runway, and they just can't afford to pay me what I was making before. So I have to take it, and then I still need the full-time job while I'm doing all this, and I was transparent with the company, saying this is not sustainable long term, because I'm barely even saving. If anything, I might be just coming out minus. But when I go to, I'm just kind of trying to position myself when I apply. Do I even mention? I think that the stuff that I'm doing with my own startup is great. They think it's great, but do I even mention the other contract job I do? It's because it's like you're just having a Band-Aid on here, and there's going to be discrimination against, like, okay, this person has just worked there for 3 months. But we can't avoid it sometimes. How would you, in terms of transparency, do you even acknowledge that or show that?
I wish we had more time, and I want to respect everyone's time. If you need to drop off, please feel free to do so. And Stevie, I want to invite you back next month to lead off with this question, because I think it's a really important one. The way first thing I would say about this is you want to find some way of being transparent. You don't want to kind of make people feel like you're hiding stuff from them, you're playing one thing off against another. At the same time, you want to be able to create a narrative which is which encourages them to value you for the very thing you're sharing with them. So one thing, and maybe this is backing up a few steps here, that I think you want to try to do is to make everything a gig. Even if it's billed as a full-time gig, it's still a consulting gig for you. And you want to kind of go in there, particularly if the parameters of the gig are missing some component, whether it's responsibility, whether it is money, whatever that might be, to try to go in there from the get-go and say, look, I'm fully committed to this. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to deliver for you. And I have other things going on at the same time. It's not necessary that I share all the details with you about that. Different businesses, not competitive with you at all. Nothing to worry about on that front. Happy to sign any non-compete, NDA you want. But just to let you know, I have a bunch of stuff happening at the same time. So that's not going to interfere. This is, these are separate issues. I wouldn't be here if I didn't feel that I could deliver 100%. But just to let you know. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's kind of what I had in mind. That's what I was thinking anyway. And yeah. I think talking, you just kind of confirmed that for me. It's you have to be really diplomatic, like you said. And if the worst case scenario would be if it's in the same industry, then they realize, wait a minute, you're working for
right,
someone in the competing space. I don't want that to happen, obviously, right?
Yeah. Well, I want to be mindful of everyone's time here, and I really appreciate you bringing up the question because I think it's a really interesting one, particularly as we are trying to navigate this question of what's a full-time gig, what's a side gig, in a short tenure world, particularly also in a world where we're trying to at this stage create more meaning and purpose in the work that we do. How do we configure it? So I want to wrap this up for this month. I'm going to make a note to get into this first thing when we meet again in February. And Stevie, I want to just implore you to join us again in February. We're going to pick right up at the beginning with this question and get back into it. Sound good?
Absolutely, yeah, my pleasure.
Great. Thank you all for being on the call today. This was really great, stimulating, wide-ranging conversation.